middle-class Americans and Canadians are having a really hard time paying their bills. If you're middle class or upper middle class and you want to preserve your purchasing power, then this is a video that you've been waiting for, because I'm going to address how you can preserve your purchasing power by moving to a tax-friendly country where your job is in demand. This is applicable to many middle class and upper middle class jobs, so this video should be great news if you've been wondering about opportunities overseas but you haven't gotten the information yet. So I wanted to fill you in on some drastic changes that we're seeing stateside and in Canada, and how you can change the trajectory of your life. Before we talk about jobs overseas, I wanted to talk with you about the current changes that we're seeing in America. Let me give an example. In California, some crazy things have happened very recently. The minimum wage has been increased, and because of the increase in hourly wages, we are now also seeing skyrocketing fast food prices across the board. I have friends in California, and my Californian friends, they are complaining about the prices they have to pay when they eat out these days. And people are leaving California for a state like Texas, where the minimum wage hasn't really increased. You know, things are pretty much the same here. Prices haven't really climbed. You know, I'm talking about fast food prices. To be fair, real estate prices have gone up a lot, simply because, you know, where I now live in Fort Worth, it is a growing area. Many people are moving here. The same is also true for Dallas, Austin, the Rio Grande Valley. These are, like, you know, the fastest growing areas now, the fastest growing metropolitans in the whole United States. We also have some in Tennessee. And what about Canadians? I mean, Canadians are going through a lot of pain these days, because just look at what's happening to their real estate markets. How much do you pay for a shoebox condo? 1,500 Canadian dollars, 2,000 Canadian dollars? I mean, this is crazy, considering Canadian salaries are actually lower than American salaries, and we're talking about in real terms, they're just lower. And yet the cost of living is probably about the same, if not higher, in certain places in Canada these days, and that's due to the migration, where migrants have just taken a lot of the affordable housing away from Canadians. It's crazy what's happening. So a lot of our Canadian clients are looking to leave Canada, and the Canadian authorities are making it actually quite hard to surrender tax residency. They're asking them to close their bank account, quit their job, sell their home, cancel their cell phone plans. I mean, you pretty much have to give everything back. You even have to return your driver's license. How does that make sense? If you're a citizen of Canada and you have to return your driver's license, I mean, you're still a Canadian. Why can't you keep it? I think maybe you should say that you lost it. I'm just making fun, obviously, but they have really crazy requirements, right? So people are fed up and people want to move out of these states. We're talking about the US and Canada, because the cost of living has become completely unaffordable, and there are better opportunity outside. So the problem that Canadians and Americans are running into are simply the lack of job opportunities overseas. Of course, if you're a highly skilled worker, or if you have like a middle class job or an upper middle class job, then it will be easier for you to find employment overseas. And before we talk about the job opportunities, I want you to have a look at some of the quotes that I received in recent days, and why it's just very difficult to make ends meet in America. And I can't really talk about Canada because I don't live in Canada, but I can talk about prices here in Texas. For instance, I just wanted to get basic teeth cleaning done. So I went to a dentistry close to where I live, and I was quoted over $800. $830 to be exact, and I just wanted to get basic cleaning done. So you know how it works. You have to go in, they do the examination, and if they find out that you have tartar, so that's underneath the gum, then they can't just do the basic cleaning. And if it's above a 3, you know, some of mine are like a 5 and a 6, and so they urge me to do the deep cleaning. That's the case, right? Unless I also go with the deep cleaning. So I couldn't get anything done here, and I kind of refused to pay these prices, because I know that when I get to a place like Paraguay or Argentina, my costs will be probably cut in half. Actually, will pay a lot less than half. You know, in Paraguay, I will probably pay 20% of that, or 25%. Last time I did deep cleaning, I paid about $170 in Mexico, and I think it was in like 2020 or 2021. So not too long ago, it was actually quite recently. And I did that because I got a quote from a dentistry in McAllen, Texas, where they wanted $1,500 from me for deep cleaning. You know, $1,500 for deep cleaning, that doesn't sound right. And I refused their offer, and I just drove my car across the southern border into Reynosa, where I got my deep cleaning done at a fraction of the cost. The service was okay. The dentistry was not as nice. It didn't feel so comfortable. It didn't feel like I was at home in my living room. And so if you're like a middle class or working class, you will have a hard time paying these medical bills. And even if you have good insurance, oftentimes your insurance may not pay for it. You know, if you need deep cleaning done every 3 months, which is what the dentistry recommends, or even if you go back a few months later to do something else, maybe they want to do deep cleaning again before they can move on to the next thing, right? So this is pretty crazy. To be fair, I understand the dentistry's point of view, because if, let's say I'm a bad customer, I'm a vicious customer, and I decide to go after them because technically if it is above the 3, then they would actually have to do the deep cleaning. That's what it says. And if not, the dentist performing the cleaning may lose his or her license. So this is a very sensitive topic for a dentist. They don't want to lose their license. And since in America lawsuits are so popular, even in the medical industry, dentistries and hospitals, they have to put certain precautions in place to protect themselves. So I totally get it. However, you know, I also explained to them I wanted to get it done in Argentina, where I pay a fraction of the cost. And they told me it's not possible to do the basic cleaning here, and so I decided to postpone it. And guess what? I ran into another unexpected invoice here in Texas. My dog got sick, and I ended up taking him to the vet for a checkup. I wanted to get some medicine. So my idea was I'm going to go to the veterinarian to pay for the consultation and get some medicine. However, that's not how it works. As soon as I got in, I was processed, and I was informed that they cannot prescribe any medicine to my dog unless he performs these tests. They weren't even going to do it, and they told me, well, there's a good chance that he has internal parasites, and that explains his diarrhea. And I was like, okay, let's do the test, because it was the only way that they would give me the medicine. I did all the tests they recommended, and they were all negative. And I told them before the tests were done, before I agreed, that he probably has nothing. And then she said, no, he will have something. He will not have nothing. That's what she said. And then this is what happened. They were all negative, and they performed them on the spot. They took a sample of, you know what, and they completed all of this. But it turned out that the tests were all negative, so the tests were done for pretty much nothing. And who knows what he caught? You know, it could have been a stomach bug or something. It could have been anything, but they forced me into doing these tests. And I actually said, stop, because this invoice was $471. If that would have been in Paraguay, I probably would have paid $100 or less for the consultation and the medicine. And oftentimes that solves the problem, because when you take antibiotics, it actually kills the internal parasites. Here's my disclaimer. I'm not a veterinarian, I'm not a doctor, but that's just what I read. Anyway, to make a long story short, I had to pay $471 to get my medicine. I also told them that I have probiotics for my dog at home and that I don't need their probiotics, but they didn't want to prescribe me the other medicine unless I was also going to take the probiotics they recommended. So everything is so systematic. You can't get anything basic done unless you agree to all these crazy tests, and they want you to spend as much as possible. Had I not said stop, I would have paid $800 to $1,000. How can a middle-class American afford this? You know, and this is just for your pet. What about your kids? You know, so you really need good insurance to make ends meet, and you can't even live. You know, this is just maintenance. This is survival. We're not talking about thriving here. We're talking about surviving. All right, let's have a look at some income numbers and how you can make ends meet. Right now, the median income, the median household income in America is roughly $77,000. This is household income. This is not just one person. So sometimes 2 or more people have to live off of that income. It's really not a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't. Middle class income falls between $51,558 and $154,590. So the people who are middle class, they're within this vicinity. Of course, middle class income varies from state to state. The middle class income in California is definitely higher than it is in Texas, and the one in New York is definitely higher than in Louisiana, right? So middle class income varies, but also you have to consider the cost of living, which is significantly lower in states like Texas, Louisiana, Alabama than California, New Jersey, and New York. So you have to look at it in real numbers, but oftentimes it comes down to almost the same thing. And make sure you watch this whole video, because I'm going to fill you in on certain middle class class jobs that you can find overseas, and where you can find them and how you can get residency in these countries. What about upper middle class income? To be upper middle class in America, you have to be in the top 20%. That's when you have a pretty good life. You're not wealthy, you're not rich, but you're living a comfortable life. How much money does that take? In Tennessee, it takes $115,174 to be upper middle class. We're talking about the upper middle class now. And guess what? You need even more money to be upper middle class in Florida. $122,779. And what about Social Security? The government says that the average monthly Social Security retirement benefit was $1,907. How can you make ends meet with this little money in the US? You can't. It's just not enough. Especially if you haven't paid off your mortgage. You can't make ends meet. You can't even retire. If you have paid off your mortgage, maybe you can make ends meet, but it's not going to be very comfortable. $1,907 is a lot more in a place like Paraguay and Argentina. That literally puts you in the upper middle class. In Paraguay and Argentina, $2,000 a month is upper middle class income, my friend. How do we look in Canada? Well, the average household income in Canada is roughly 100,000 Canadian dollars. Sounds like a lot, but it really isn't, considering the purchasing power of the Canadian dollar also going away. You're looking at not that much money, and this is household income. It's not a single individual that earns that money. To be upper middle class in Canada, you need 140,000 or more. I know these numbers look incredibly high, but you have to look at what your money buys you in Canada. If you have to pay $30,000 a year in rent and you only make $70,000 as a household, how can you make ends meet? You can't. This is just not enough money. So no wonder why so many Canadians are moving overseas. Let's have a look at some middle class jobs that you may be able to get overseas. An office manager. This is a job that you may be able to get for a number of reasons. Especially if you're bilingual and you want to go to a country. Let's say you want to become an office manager in Asia. This is very possible. Even if you just speak your native language, you're not bilingual, you may be able to get a job as an office manager somewhere in Asia. It's very possible. Now, if you're bilingual, if you speak English and Spanish, you may be able to get an office manager position in a place like Argentina, Paraguay, Mexico, and different Latin American countries where you probably don't get paid 70,000 Canadian dollars annually, but maybe you get paid half of that or 40% of that, but since you get 20 to 30 cents on the dollar, your money goes a much further way in a place like Paraguay and Argentina than in Ontario. If you're a professor, that's another middle class position, another middle class job. If you work at a university, if you're a professor, then you may get paid, I don't know how much, maybe $30,000 per year. This is possible for certain positions. I know this sounds kind of high, and I'm actually not talking about Canadian dollars, not American dollars. We're going to get to the Americans in a moment, but it's possible that you could get paid 30,000 Canadian dollars, right? This is much less in US dollars, but it's possible if your specialty is in high demand. If you have certain qualifications that are in high demand in a country like Argentina or Mexico, you could get paid that kind of money. Is it likely? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you have to settle for less than 30,000. Maybe you have to settle for 20,000, right? Or 25. We're talking about Canadian dollars, right? 20 to 25,000 Canadian dollars per year. This is possible for you to get paid that kind of money working a middle class job in a Latin American country. In Panama, you can definitely do that, but in Panama, the cost of living is much higher than in many other Latin American countries. So you have to factor everything, not only how much you get paid, but the cost of living, and you just have to see whether you can retain your purchasing power or not. But many of you guys are Canadians and you want to move overseas to have a higher quality of life. You want to get out of the bad weather and you just want to be in a more sunny environment, right? So you actually kill multiple birds with one stone. It isn't just about getting paid less and leaving Canada. No, it's about the quality of life improvements that you realize when moving abroad. An obvious category is, of course, people who work online, like say a social media manager, a digital personal assistant, or like a sales position that requires the internet, where you can maybe still work for a company. And these are all options. However, if you want to move abroad and you still want to keep working for, say, your Canadian company, maybe you can't do that because in order to surrender Canadian tax residency, you also have to leave your job. So maybe you have to start working working for a different company, that's not based in Canada. So there's so many contingencies here. It's really crazy, but you may be able to get a job or create some kind of online business where you would have that kind of income, right? I want to give you an example here. I met someone in Asia that was already like 13 years ago, and he worked for a company in China. I'm not going to mention it, but you probably would know the name. And he got paid, back then he was getting paid about $200,000 per year. $200,000 annually. I mean, that's a lot of income in China. And that was already like, I met him in a different country, but he worked in China before he came to that country. That's a tremendous amount of money. And this is crazy, but he worked as a CEO, a chief executive officer, right? So this is like an upper middle class income position. This is not a middle class income position, but if you can get that kind of position, and now we're talking about upper middle class, if you can get that kind of position, say you're an American or Canadian and you want to go live somewhere in Asia, or maybe Latin America, probably more likely in Asia to get that kind of position working for a company there than Latin America. There's just more opportunities there, I think, unless you work online, right? But you could also work for a local company in Brazil and Argentina, maybe in Paraguay. There are not a lot of jobs like this. They exist, but there's not a lot of them. You really have to hunt them down and you have to really sell yourself, as always. But this is something worth considering. I mean, the amount of money that you can save, even that kind of income, in America would be fantastic to have. But if you can have that in a tier 2 or tier 3 country, and especially if you move to a territorial tax country and you take advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion, you could actually save a lot of money there, even if you have to pay, say, local taxes, in Paraguay, where the local tax rate is 10%. Now, I'm not making the claim that you're going to find this job in Paraguay and that there are tons of it. There are some jobs like it, but there are not an abundance of them, right? It's much more likely for you to find a middle class job than an upper middle class job. Of course, you need to have the right qualifications, the right work experience, recommendations, endorsements and all that, but it's possible. If you're like a psychologist, like a bilingual psychologist, let's say you speak English and Spanish, you could potentially open up something in Paraguay, Argentina, or in any Latin country where you could earn a lot of money, especially if you bring your foreign skill set with you into the region and also your work ethic and all of that. That's going to make a big difference, right? Physicians, dentists, lawyers, right? Lawyers make good money no matter where you look, no matter what country we're talking about. Lawyers make phenomenal money. Accountants often too, right? They make very good money. So you want to target, if you're upper middle class, stay in the same profession and see what country you could move to where you would have the best chances for your own success. Another job that's kind of underrated and not really talked about very often is becoming an executive assistant. If you can apply at a decent firm that has good annual volume and profit, and you bring a certain skill set to the table that they don't have, where they really have to import labor to fill that position, guess what? You could have a phenomenal income living in a tier 2 or tier 3 country while paying little taxes. So an executive assistant often has a very good income. So this is something worth looking into. Obviously, I wanted to make some recommendations inside this video. If you want to go live in the Far East, there's a good chance you can find many, upper middle class jobs, say a chief financial officer, a chief executive officer, or, if you want to become like a COO, there will be plenty of jobs in the Far East where they really want to hunt down foreigners to fill these positions because they are looking for different skill sets. So you could perfectly blend in with your skill set and preserve a high paying position while minimizing your taxes at the same time. I think this is a fantastic option that you have, and there are definitely more jobs in the Far East, and especially also the Middle East, where you have a lot of rich companies now based in Dubai. This is something you want to look into. These upper middle class jobs, they do exist in Latin America, but there aren't that many. So you really have to know where to apply and just be very, very persistent with companies. But they do exist, right? So you just have to do your homework, but there's going to be fewer in Latin America because there's just less industry there. Now, if you're a middle class American or middle class Canadian and you want to preserve middle class income to preserve your status in the middle class, then, like we said, there are several positions that you may want to consider, such as office manager positions, social media strategist positions, professors, and many more. Paraguay is definitely a country where it's easier to get residency. You don't have to prove economic solvency. If a company were to bring you in, then they should sponsor sponsor you like we're doing this now. We're looking for some people to come down to Paraguay to work for Nomad Elite there. And this is what we're looking to do now. But if you find the right job, the company should sponsor you to get the visa, to get the work permit. Some companies don't want to do that, so I don't recommend you to take the job unless you're 100% legal, get your residence permit, your work permit, and this is how it should be done. The same holds true for Argentina. Please make sure that you find a sponsor. Sometimes you have to fly down on a preliminary contract. You know, it's going to be like a test phase of say 30 days. They give you a trial. Depending on how you perform, they will then hire you. And once you perform well during the preliminary period, then you may be able to obtain a residence permit, and they take care of all of this. So the application process, the fees, that's all covered by the company, right? But you have to deserve your spot, and that often takes proof of concept. What is your take on the middle class income situation in America and Canada? We would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in obtaining a residence permit in Paraguay or Argentina, please contact us now. You should see our website link displayed right on the screen. There should also be a link below the video. Contact us. Thank you for watching Nomad Elite. We see you on the next video.